hear the views of the residents of Gqeberha with regards to the application that was filed by Eskom, filed with NERSA by Eskom. My name is Nomfundo Maseti, and I am the full-time regulator member, primarily responsible for piped gas at NERSA. I am today chairing the public hearings for the electricity subcommittee of the energy regulator. With me today, I have the energy regulator chairperson, Mr. Thembani Pukula. Mr. Pukula, if you can kindly greet.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to me, I have Mr. Muzuvukile Mkhize, who is the member primarily responsible for petroleum pipelines, also the member of the electricity subcommittee. Mr. Mkhize.
Good morning, Chairperson, fellow panelists, as well as all the attendees today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To my immediate left, I have Advocate Nomalanga Stole, who is the CEO of NERSA and the member of the electricity subcommittee.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much. To my far left, I have Mr. Tembeka Simane, who is the part-time regulator member at NERSA and the chairperson of the finance committee, as well as the member of the electricity subcommittee. Ms. Simane.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, members. Today is about the hearings on the application of the MYPD6, an application that was filed by Eskom with NERSA. This hearing was duly advertised in various newspapers, and some of them are Rapport, Sowetan, National Independent Newspaper, Sunday Times, Business Days, and in national radio stations, as well as in the NERSA website and social media. The hearing today is held in accordance with the NERSA rules that regulate or govern public hearings, and this is the second opportunity that we're providing to stakeholders, as we have already requested stakeholders to submit their views in writing, and this time around we are allowing for oral presentations so that we can hear if there are other stakeholders that would like to submit their views and facts that the energy regulator needs to take into consideration before we take a final decision. As indicated, this hearing is governed in terms of the NERSA rules, and the rules have been approved in line with the National Energy Regulator Act of 2004. And some of those rules, I'm going to summarize them as they are going to govern the proceedings of today. All parties will be required to make their presentations under oath. Presenters have been allocated different times in accordance with the request. I would like to emphasize that we have allocated a little bit more time to Eskom being the applicant, reason being that we want to give you an opportunity to get all the relevant details with regards to the aspects and particulars of the application. So we just want to indicate that, because sometimes some stakeholders feel that we allocate more time than the others, so as if we are not equals. But if you need more time, you can indicate it. Then we can decide how much more time we can assign to you so that you can complete your presentation. Only the members of the panel may ask questions. However, if there is a member of the public who would like to get clarification, you can write your question on a piece of paper and hand over the piece of paper to Walter. Walter is at the back, Walter Mabunda at the back. Then Walter will bring the piece of paper to us. Then we can decide how we can put the question to the presenters. Should presenters wish to present information that they consider to be confidential, please let us know so that we can decide whether we still want to hear that information that is confidential, and so that we can be able to clear the room to hear such information. Now, I would like, because I've had a lot of cell phones ringing and they will interrupt our proceedings, and I would like to appeal that you switch off your cell phones at this point, or put your cell phones on silent. And if you you can also try not to speak when other people are speaking. We have received 9 requests from presenters today, and we'll start with ESCOM. For ESCOM, I would like to invite Mr. Khalib Kasim to come forward, but before we do that, I would like to allow for evacuation procedures if we have somebody who's going to brief us on how we are supposed to evacuate.
A warm welcome is extended to all visitors from ETC staff. Security guards are permitted to search any vehicles and belongings of any persons entering and leaving premises. Drugs and alcohol are strictly not allowed on these premises. Any persons who appears to be under the influence of alcohol and drugs will be removed from these premises immediately.
Switch on the mic.
The evacuation area is behind the conference center on the grass park. Evacuation areas can be through the main entrance, and you just walk around the conference center to the back, or you can use these doors over here, the grey doors, and there's a red door that will lead you to the grass park. Please complete attendance register, which is used in case of emergency to trace any persons present. Once entering the conference center, male's toilet on the left, female's toilet on the right. We hope you enjoy your visit to ETC.
Thank you very much. Just to indicate the fact that there are translation services that are provided, including the sign language. For those who would like to make use of the translation of the interpretation services, you can get the headphones, and channel 1 is English, channel 2 is Xhosa, and then channel 3 is Afrikaans, should you wish to make use of those services. At this point in time, I would like to invite ESCOM to come forward. Mr. Kasim, if you can come forward. Mr. Kasim, may you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. May you please state your full name and your designation at ESCOM for the record.
Chair, and my name is Caleb Kasim. I'm the Group Financial Officer of ESCOM Holdings.
All right, thank you very much. If you are the only one who's going to do the presentations, then I'm comfortable. Okay, one more?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning, sir. May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and your designation at ESCOM.
My name is Gavin Herford. I'm the National Control Manager at System Operator in the newly formed National Transmission Company South Africa.
Thank you very much. You may start with your presentation, Mr. Kasim.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and panel members. I'll do part of the presentation around the MYPD6 application, and then Gav will come and present from a system operator perspective. So, Chairperson and members, I think it's important before even going into the application to appreciate the strategy of ESCOM. 4 key pillars in terms of our strategy of the organization. Firstly is to pursue financial and operational sustainability. Effectively, what we do see is that the performance of the operations does filter through directly in terms of our financial performance. In the generation value chain, we're looking to strive to get to 70% EAF by the end of March 2025. We've already seen through the recovery plan of generation the benefits it's made and the difference, but we need to continuously focus on maintaining those plants. Key to this strategy, ladies and gentlemen, and chairperson and panel members, we have made a strategic shift from the 2035 strategy of shutting down plant to continued operations to 2030 because of the importance of security of supply to the country. So that impact and implications does then come through in the costs that filtered through over this MYPD6 period, specifically around maintenance costs, and also linked to that will be additional production, which previously under the shutdown was not included from a strategic perspective. As we do this, we need to strive for efficiencies and ensure that we also improve our controls and address fraud, corruption, and criminality. Leadership has been stabilized in the organization, firstly with the stability at the board level, the chairman, and now our new group chief executive, Mr. Dan Morakani. We've also, as part of aligning to the strategy, have recruited and appointed some senior executives in key portfolios to help drive the delivery of the Eskom holding strategy. As we do this, we know the industry is changing, and we need to be able to prepare ourselves for that in terms of what is happening, in terms of the transmission changes, the need to expand the grid to cater for capacity to be connected, and on the distribution side to deal with the changes that is coming through in protecting those grids, and also moving forward in terms of rolling out of smart meters and microgrids going forward throughout this period. We also acknowledge as Eskom that if you look at where we will land around 2035, we're not going to be this 80% dominated coal company. That coal production and capacity will reduce, but will need to be replaced by a combination of renewables, one from the IPPs and the private sector. But as Eskom, we're also looking to expand our renewable base. We want to also play in pump storage, gas, and then as a country, we know the importance of having base load and further nuclear. Chair, as we do this, these are the key strategies that are underlined in terms of that influences the MYPD6 application, and we'll go through this over the course of the next 2.5 weeks. Chair, in terms of the application, we've consulted with SALGA and National Treasury as is required. We've then taken that into account when we made our application to NERSA in terms of current legislation and in terms of the MYPD methodology. As part of that, Chair, we put forward an application with our inputs together with the inputs of all stakeholders during the course of this 2.5 weeks to influence the decision that the regulator will make by the end of December in terms of Eskom's allowable revenue request over the next 3 years. And I'll go into more detail on what are those drivers to that allowable revenue in terms of that operating cost base, the primary energy cost base, and then on the asset base, a migration of our return on assets to a much more sustainable level from our current starting point of 1.58% in this current year. So, Chairperson, as I move forward, it's important that as part of this process and decision that will be made by the regulator, only efficient costs will be passed on to the consumers. There are prudency criteria that we need to adhere to that NERSA will challenge us during the course of these hearings, and we look to accordingly respond to that from an efficiency and a prudency perspective. And that's what we will do under the respective sections in terms of the MYPD6 application in front of us today. Chair and members and to the audience, I think it's important just to again step back a bit. There is another application in front of the regulator which is called the Retail Tariff Plan. So currently these public hearings are around the revenue application called MYPD6, with that determination expected by end of December. The Retail Tariff Plan is dealing with tariff structures, which is important as you're starting to change the industry, and then they should talk to those changes. We expect that determination to be made around January. So then you take the outcomes of the tariff structures as well as the MYPD6. That then gets combined into an ELS application that will be effective by the end of March for tabling in terms of the MFMA, and then it will result in the price adjustments to Eskom's direct customers on the 1st of April and to municipalities on the 1st of July next year. So I think just to appreciate, there is another process that will be undertaken in the next few weeks that goes together. Those two outcomes get added to give you the eventual tariffs, and those implications you will see from the next financial year going forward. Jay, in terms of the allowable revenue, it's a mechanism that says your regulatory asset base, which is effectively the infrastructure across the value chain of the generation, the transmission business, as well as the distribution business, and then your operating costs used to generate, transmit, and distribute the electricity to the end consumers. And I will unpack that during the course of my presentation. Chair, so from an Eskom perspective, what does this all mean in terms of the rand amount of the allowable revenue? So what you see there, that the request is that in FY26, the total allowable revenue being requested is 445 billion. It increases to 495 billion and 536 billion rand. First point I want to just highlight is the asset base. You see from the current determination of 988 billion, that is going up marginally to 1 trillion and 66 billion in the first year, and then it goes to 1.2 trillion by FY28. So what happens there, as you add and commission more assets to the asset base, that gets added to the regulatory assets, and then once we have that, we are asking for this migration of the return on assets from 1.58% in the first year to 4%, 5%, and 6% throughout this period. This phased approach from an Eskom board perspective is helping to, from our perspective, is balancing the needs and what is required for the sustainability of Eskom, also appreciating what it means from a consumer perspective. In terms of some key items in this application, firstly, you will see that on the primary energy there is a increase in the first year from the 93 billion to the 128 billion, and we will unpack that coming through in terms of coal costs, startup and fuel costs are key drivers. We also talk about OCGTs and other costs around primary energy. However, we do acknowledge, and what we see coming through is that there has been a lag in terms of IPPs being connected to the grid, and that has meant that generation had to pick up that additional production. However, during the course of the MYPD6, you see then the ramp up in IPPs coming through. Also, Chair, you will see the element and around carbon tax in terms of policy and that implementation, and those costs coming through with 5 billion in the first year at 25%. Only a quarter is affected in the first year, and then it ramps up to the full impact by carry on.
Yes, so you may carry on. We were just worried about people that are affected by the aircon, which is not working.
Okay.
We hope that you will also be fine there. You won't faint, but you can take some water if you feel like.
I'm fine, Chair.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks. Chair, yes, and then we do see the carbon tax come through. We've also included arrear debts at 2% of allowable revenue. However, it is running at much higher, around 4 to 5% of allowable of our current revenue, and this is linked to the 90 odd billion that we see as Eskom in terms of outstanding arrear debts from municipalities. And then, Chair, just going through in terms of the RCAs, we only have cut. We only have the current decisions of the RCA that has been liquidated. Chair, I think I just want to also correct some maybe misunderstanding. The recent RCA decision of the 8 billion rand, I think for FY22, if I'm correct, NASA's made that decision. That amount is not included in that application. That liquidation is still to be determined. When that comes in, the regulator will decide. So it's not in this application. I just wanted to clarify that. Chair, in terms of financial sustainability, tariffs alone is not going to make Eskom financially sustainable. That is a key contributing factor. However, we need to deal with the ability to collect from municipalities. That is not sustainable. No business can survive if they are owed 90 billion rand. We as Eskom must deal with our own cost efficiencies. We acknowledge that, and we're driving in terms of driving cost efficiencies throughout the business. The fourth and the other key component, with the debt relief we've got from government and the previous supports that we've had over the last few years, cumulatively at the end of the debt relief period of March 26, government through National Treasury would have put in 496 billion rand to Eskom. And we're looking at the end of this application to be on a footing where we don't go back to National Treasury in the future when we need to then go into the capital markets to raise funds. And when we say not going back, we mean 2 points. We don't want to go back to National Treasury for guarantees. That has an impact on their balance sheet, and we don't want to go back for any further equity injections, which means that through dealing with the tariffs, through government addressing the municipal debt, and us dealing with our cost efficiencies, we should be in a position to then deal with our operations, our infrastructure growth going forward at the end of this cycle. Chair, around the asset base, I think just over history there's been some significant differences, but we are confident that through the last determination of MYPD5, you can see in this graph, whereas in FY23 the difference between our valuation and what the regulator determined was 700 billion, that has come down to in FY25 of 300 billion. So we see close alignment there, and obviously through efficiencies NASA challenges us, and we expect that this alignment and trend to continue over the MYPD6 period. This is just showing the returns that was applied for over a number of years, what was awarded, and effectively showing you're coming off a base of 1.6%, migrating to 4, 5, and 6%. just to highlight that in terms of our cost of debt currently sitting around 10.4%. Chair, I'm not going to go into the details around the RAB methodology, effectively understanding that the asset-based evaluation is used on a benchmark analysis basis, which NERSA will interrogate as well. And then as we also, based on the timing and the commissioning of assets coming through, that gets incorporated into the asset base in the MYPD6, like it has in previous determinations. Chair, the question that was asked at Cape Town is, what is the impact of, and here we focused on Medupi and Kusile in terms of this revenue application. So the numbers in green are showing you the rand amount included in that revenue requirement that is linked to Medupi and Kusile from a return perspective as well as the depreciation, because you get the asset base and then you depreciate it over its remaining life. Chair, the point when you get into the first year of FY26, all 6 units of Medupi have been commissioned and 5 units of Kusile with 1 unit that is outstanding. But what it's showing you effectively from the FY25 decision of the 15 billion rand, that combination of return and depreciation per the methodology then goes up to 21 billion. And the driver to that is substantially linked to this return on assets that we requesting to go from the 1.58% to the 4% in the first year. And then you can see that it then grows to 24 billion and 26 billion, obviously with the last unit of Kusile coming through. Just wanted to highlight that what it means in terms of the overall revenue that is being requested. Chair, in terms of where we seek, and yeah, I'm going to just effectively talk around FY25 to 26, and what this graph is showing us that over and above what is happening in the asset base and the returns, the key other changes that do impact this application is the primary energy, which I've spoken about, but there's an appreciation that, as indicated, that generation plant had to generate another 14 terawatt hours more than what was assumed at the time during FY25 in the determination because of that delays in IPPs coming online, and those factors come through in terms of the coal costs. But we've also seen that much more usage being required in terms of gas and oil startup coming through, and then it's the maintenance around our operating costs in terms of our asset base. Chair, this was highlighted in Cape Town in terms of our staff complement, and what we are showing here, we have reduced staff from a peak of 45,000 in FY 2016. We're currently running at an ESCOM level of around 33,000. You will also see, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about ESCOM staff, there's a number of 40,000, and that includes when we add our big subsidiary ESCOM Rotec Industries of 7,000 people. But the point here we are highlighting that yes, we have reduced. We're not where NERSA's reference is, but we also in this application highlighting based on the changes that are required and coming through, there is a need for additional skills to come through during the course of the MYPD6. Chair, I'm not going to go into the detail on maintenance, but the only point to make here is that what we've seen, the alignment and the importance where NERSA does award maintenance, and we are now utilizing, and we're seeing the benefit of that coming through in the performance across ESCOM. In terms of our other operating costs and the mix of that, some key items to highlight is our insurance costs based on market dynamics of about 6.3 billion. We also have to, and then with regard to property, plant and equipment and to service those, that is coming through at about 4 billion rand, and in terms of software and licenses, 1.6 billion rand. Yeah, Chair, in terms of the breakup, in the first year in particular of the 36%, as I explained, the key components are coming through some 11% on the primary energy component in terms of the allowable revenue, another 10% on OPEX, and then the other components, as I've discussed, including as more and more negotiated pricing agreements were awarded between MYPD5's duration to where we're sitting now, that element of 5.7 does come through. Once you go to the second and the third year, you will see that from a operating cost perspective, it's around 6% over those different components. When you look from between that and what I would call the policy items, you do see the full component of carbon tax coming through, and then as indicated, the IPPs ramping up, and then you can see what happens in the third year. Chair, this is just expressing it as a cents per kilowatt per hour of the price of electricity, broken down into those different components. Yeah, Chair, a big theme that was raised during the Cape Town hearings was around affordability, and we do expect that throughout this hearings. First and foremost, I think it's important that yes, there's the electrification and access to electricity, the importance of utilizing the free basic electricity that is made available by National Treasury, but what we found as we close in Cape Town, only on studies that were performed by the Reserve Bank, that only around 20% is actually being utilized, and it's important for municipalities and government to address that issue to help protect the vulnerable residents. And then as a ESCOM, in terms of our tariff structure, in terms of our home light 20 amps, we've got an embedded subsidy of 43%. And then lastly, in terms of the inclining block tariffs, as part of the retail tariff plan, we are proposing that we should have a flat structure where you don't pay much more once you exceed 350 kilowatts per hour. Chair, I think I've basically spoken around protection of the poor. This is the important slide I was talking about, and again, what it's showing in subsequent studies by Stats SA, that now it's even less than 2 million customers that are benefiting from the free basic electricity for the 50 kilowatts per hour. Chair, that is my section of the presentation. If you allow me now, I'll hand over to Gav to talk about the system operator and how does they go about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kasim.
Chairperson, members of the panel, members of the public, thank you for the opportunity. Perhaps just to start with what the system operator is, maybe not everybody knows who we are. So we're a really tiny group of people who operate the real-time operations of the power system. So we're responsible, amongst other things, in dispatching the generation. That includes the ESCOM generation as well as the dispatchable independent power producers. So we balance the grid, keeping the supply and demand in balance by dispatching generation for that. What I'm going to do today, Chairperson, is just take us through a quick story, if you like, of the power system over the last 8 months or so. It's glibly called the status of the power system, but I'm sure by the time I get to the end, you'll agree with me that there's been a lot of activity, and quite unusual activity compared to what we've seen in past years. I also am going to apologize up front. I'm going to get fairly technical. Stay with me, bear with me. It is certainly worthwhile going on this journey. I'll take us through some of the demand graphs that we've seen. I think that's of great interest at the moment. But we'll also look at the emergency reserves, which have had a lot of coverage in the press recently. And then I'm going to spend quite a while on the renewable generation that's been connected to our grid. I think this is something that, as South Africans, it might have happened while we weren't watching. And we'll get an opinion on that possibly at the end. But a very exciting story in South Africa around renewables. And then finally, I'll just give an update on the outlook for the next few months and what we can expect of this power system. Just in summary, so our energy sent out from the beginning of the financial year, and of course from the beginning of April for Eskom, is about 2.3% lower if we consider what was dispatched from the dispatchable generators. So there's generators that we have control over, that we can change their output. If we include the renewable generators as well, which are providing into the grid, we're also down by about 2.3% on the energy sales from the grid this year. The open cycle gas turbines, the independently owned ones, they have a load factor of about 3.9% so far this financial year. Load factor is more or less the percentage of time that they've run out of 100% of time. In comparison to last year, we had a load factor of around 17.1%. So you can see a dramatic reduction in the use of independent power producer OCGTs. The Eskom OCGT is slightly higher, 6.9%, comparative to last year, 20%. So again, a significant reduction in the amount of diesel that was burned in the OCGTs. We've had to actually reduce the renewable output 38 times this financial year. Now, what does that mean? That means that during certain parts, particularly in the early hours of the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, or at 12 noon, we've had too much connected to the power system, and so we've had to reduce the output from either the PV or from the wind generation. This has happened 38 times already. We've had no load shedding this year, this financial year for Eskom, again since the 26th of March 2024 when we stopped load shedding, so we haven't had that. Unfortunately for the calendar year 2024, we still did have those 83 days where we did have to implement load shedding at the beginning of the year. We peak in South Africa, we have the peak demand on our power system in the winter months. The highest peak for this year, it actually happened, if we're looking at just what was supplied by the dispatchable generators, it happened on the 22nd of July, and we supplied 32,043 megawatts as the peak demand that evening. In comparison, you can see it's slightly down, about 1,000 megawatts down from the previous year. And this is just what was supplied from the Eskom generators. However, if you look at what was supplied from the Eskom generators as well as the renewable generators, so I'm talking about the grid-connected generators, we actually supplied on the 9th of July 33,485 megawatts, which was really only about 400 megawatts lower than 2023. So the actual peak demand of this country has not really reduced significantly. What has changed slightly is the proportion in which Eskom suppliers and independent power producers supply. I'll get into quite a lot of detail around the renewable generation in a moment, Chairperson. All right. This is the one where I say bear with me. It's a little bit technical, but certainly worth the brain power to look at it. What we're looking at here is a graph of the peak demand for each week, starting at the beginning of our financial year in Eskom. The black solid line that you see there is the peak demand that was supplied from generators that are dispatchable. In other words, generators that are under our control as a system operator. We can control them, we can tell them to increase their output or decrease their output. And you can see the black line, the comparative line, that blue dotted line is last year. So you can see a significantly lower amount of power being produced at the beginning of the financial year. But as you move towards the May period, you'll see that the black line and the dotted blue line start to come together, meaning we were dispatching almost the same amount of power per week for the weekly peaks as we were last year. The shaded orange area is where we add the renewable generation onto the dispatchable generation. So in other words, everything that's feeding into the grid, That's the sum total of it, the peaks that were supplied that week. The interesting number here is if you look at the distance between the solid black line and the top of the shaded orange area, this is what was supplied by the renewable generators onto the grid. This is what supplied the customer base during those periods. The comparative is the sort of turquoisey line. So using the exact same legend, this is the power, as I say, the peak demand for each week. What's a lot more interesting is if we look at the energy that was supplied by the various entities over the same period. So once again, it's our financial year from the beginning of April. Solid black line, what was supplied from the dispatchable generators. And again, you can see that same pattern. Up until about mid-May, a lot less being supplied from the dispatchable generators, and then from mid-May going into the winter months, and interestingly continuing into the summer months, we have a very similar output of our generators compared to last year, with those black line and the dotted line meet each other. And again, the difference between the black line and the orange is the energy supplied by the renewable generators. It's a significant amount of energy, and we'll take a deep dive into that in a moment. Again, if you just take a very careful look, you can see up until May, that energy that was supplied quite far reduced, contributing to that 2.3% I was talking about in reduction year on year. But going from May forward, very similar energy output to last year. I hope there are no bare electrics in this one. Let's talk a little bit about the open cycle gas turbines. So at the system operators...
Sorry, Mr. I think the system is not really helping us, and I'm sure also from your side, and we struggled also during the time Mr. Kasim was presenting. I would like to propose that we take a short break and see if we can correct this, and then we'll come back. We can take about 5 to 10 minutes. They will tell us, and then we sort it out so that people don't deprive people of the details, especially those who may want to take some points down. All right, thank you very much. We'll adjourn the hearing, and then we'll resume in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
please settle down, please? May we settle down, please? May we resume, please? Thank you.
All right, we are ready to resume the hearing. May you please close the doors so we can start? We will try to work with what we have. You may please continue, Mr. Gavin, and remember that you are still under oath and everything applies.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, maybe I thought perhaps that was getting back at me for the load shedding. It's interrupting this. Thank you, Chairperson. I think it's better that we did take that little break. So let me continue. I was about to just go through the usage of the open cycle gas turbines. What we see in front of us here is a weekly output. Those bars that you see there are the weekly outputs of the different open cycle gas turbines. The top section there are the privately owned gas turbines. We have 2 power stations. And again, it's a very familiar figure, and I think you're starting to see this pattern throughout the presentation. The beginning of the financial year, around April, May, we ran the open cycle gas turbines fairly hard, and then it was quite a lull, and we didn't run them very hard until, again, in September we had a fairly rough month where we needed to lean on the open cycle gas turbines a little bit more. And exactly the same with the Eskom. If you have a look at the below, the blue bars are the Eskom weekly runs of open cycle gas turbines. You can see the lines that we have there. That's the cumulative load factor that we have for them for each year. And as I say, in comparison to last year, a lot less usage of those gas turbines. This is the same data, but a little bit more detail from a few years back. We're looking at from 2021. Each one of those colors are nasty. Each one of those bars represents the burn from 2021 for each month. And again, you can see 2023, where we utilized the open cycle gas turbines a lot to try and supplement and manage the stability of this power system. You can see the purple bars and then the more mauve bars. You can see how low those runs have been. In particular, as we went into April, May, very low utilization of those generators. June we utilized them a bit more, and then very low utilization again until September. So overall, the gas turbines have been doing exactly what they were designed to do as peaking plant. And this is something that we need to get used to as South Africans, is as we go forward, we're going to need a different mix of generation. We're going to need to use our generators very differently. And I think this will become more apparent when I show you some of the renewable generation characteristics that we are seeing. But suffice to say that we will definitely need to start looking at the way we utilize these resources differently. This is a very busy graph, and it only goes back the last 2 weeks, but I think it illustrates what we've been dealing with since about April this year. One of the other resources that we utilized very, very hard during the load shedding period in 2023 was the pump storage. And again, pump storage is what we call a flexible plant. It is a fast start, fast stop type of plant. Unfortunately, we do have to pump water to the top dams in order to be able to run the water down to the bottom dams and generate. And so this year, again, we've been able to manage these dam levels to the point where we've been able to replenish the dams, even sometimes utilizing the daytime PV to pump back the water. And unlike 2023, in 2024, we've managed to cycle these dams very efficiently to manage the peak, exactly what they were designed for, to manage those high morning and evening peaks where we don't have that PV support. A similar story, this is just the diesel levels at the open cycle gas turbine power stations. We have 4 OCGT power stations, 2 owned by Eskom, 2 owned by independents. The diesel levels, you can see, pretty much flatlined. We did utilize them on the Saturday. Last Saturday we utilized them a fair amount. But once again, if you looked at this and compared it to 2023, where we were continuously running low on diesel stock at the different power stations, we couldn't keep the deliveries high enough to supplement what was required by the customers during those periods of constrained generation. It's a very different story, a completely different way of running these open cycle gas turbines. And again, as South Africans, we're going to need to get used to this concept that we're going to need flexible plant, we're going to need peaking plant, and we're going to utilize, for example, diesel over evening peaks, because it makes sense in the long run in the economics of the power system to run a short period of diesel generators rather than keeping coal-fired generators just idling along for days on end. And this is the type of mindset change we're going to have to get used to as we go forward in time now. Just a quick summary of where we were with the load shedding. I've put 4 different indicators up here, and it goes back to 2013. These are calendar years. Traditionally, we in South Africa have measured load shedding by the number of days of load shedding, and you can see the 335 days that we had in 2023, down to 83 days at the beginning of 2024, again, which ended on the 26th of March. What's interesting is the number of hours, which is indicated by that orange, that yellow line that you see in the top graph there. So the number of hours also significantly reduced. Those are very coarse indicators. I think the bottom graph shows us a much more sensitive indicator and really a more economic impact type of indicator. So if we look at the green line, that is for those of you who are familiar with gigawatt hours or energy, that's the amount of energy that was not supplied due to load shedding. And again, really high in 2023, coming down to 2024, where we've got a much lower base. Just keep in mind, this is year to date for the calendar year of 2024, and as we end off the year, these numbers will come down slightly, since we are not going to load shed between now and the end of the year. The percentage, and for me this is the indicator that really speaks to me the most as a South African, the percentage of power not served due to load shedding. 2023, 7.3% of this country's power that they wanted could not be served. 2024, that number has reduced to 1.25, and as we go towards the end of the year, that number should drop down slightly lower again. As I say, it's a year-to-date figure. Right. A little bit about our performance of the generation, of the Eskom generation fleet. For the most part, the dispatchable generators are still owned by Eskom. We now have 3 separate independent power companies who we, as system operator, dispatch their plant. But for the most part, this will be the dispatchable Eskom plant that we're talking about here. Some of you will remember we introduced the summer plan at the end of August. We gave an outlook, and we've been measuring our performance against this outlook. In the outlook, and I'll take us into that detail of that just now, and I'll give us just a sneak peek of where we're going. But in that outlook, we defined 3 scenarios, and we said if our unplanned breakdowns are between 13,000 and 14,000, that was one scenario. Between 14,000 and 15,000, that would be another scenario, and so on. And those 3 shaded areas you see in that top graph are the actual summer plan scenarios, the summer outlook scenarios. What we've been tracking as the system operator is the amount of time that the generator's unplanned breakdowns have been in those different categories. So for example, we've got a category from 7.5 to 8,000 megawatts of breakdowns, and the fleet since the 1st of January, since the 1st of September, has been there for 0.9% of the time. So to interpret that, what we can say is for 0.9% of the time, our unplanned unavailability of the Eskom fleet has been between 7.5 and 8,000 megawatts. If you just glance across that histogram, you'll see that the majority of the time, about 17.5% of the time, we've been operating between 11,000 and 11,500 megawatts, significantly below what we as a system operator projected for the breakdowns for the summer period. We were projecting that we would be operating around about 13,000, so significant improvement compared to where we thought we would be. The bottom graph is really just for each week of this financial year so far. What we've done is we've taken the minimum availability, minimum unavailability, the maximum unavailability, and the average. Now that seems like a strange measure, and don't look at each point of the graph, but look at the trend. If you look at the trend in unplanned unavailability since the beginning of our financial year in April, you can definitely see that downward trend. What is still of concern to us as a system operator is if for each week on each point on that graph, if you look at the minimum and you look at the maximum, there's about a 4,000 megawatt difference. All right, let that sink in for a moment. In 1 week or 168 hours, the variability of our dispatchable fleet is around about 4,000 megawatts. All right. We call this our uncertainty as a system operator, and this is the reason why we do scenario planning. What is very encouraging for us, however, is that downward trend that we are seeing. If you look at that average, how it's downward, we have some bad weeks, but we've got that downward trend and we continue to trend that direction. This is one of those that you really need to bear with me. It's a very, very messy graph, but it tells quite a story. The graph starts at the beginning of January 2017. It's our unplanned unavailability, or for practical purposes, let's call that our breakdowns. And our breakdowns started to increase month on month from 2017. And you'll see there, around about March 2020, there's a sudden drop. All right. There's a reason for that. That was the COVID lockdown. When we all went into lockdown, the country's demand plummeted, and that gave us the opportunity then to take some of these generators off and do some maintenance. From the beginning of the lockdown onward, you will see that we are still deteriorating. The unplanned unavailability or the breakdowns are still increasing in time. However, they were increasing at a much lower rate. If you look at those two ramp rates of the two sections before March 2020 and after March 2020. And here's the real turnaround that happened, and it was hidden for most of us. If we go back as far as around January 2023, we started to see the breakdowns plateau. We were still load shedding, we had those 3 Kusile units off, but we started to plateau, and you can see there are 1 or 2 months where we had an outlier. May 2023 is this particular outlier, but we did plateau, and then you'll see the recovery begin. And you can see in earnest how the recovery really began around about March, where we see that drop in unplanned unavailability or less and less breakdowns as we've moved forward. And this trend continues into the future. Many of us don't think that South Africa is a country rich in renewables, or should I say with a lot of renewables. And I hope today, after I've finished this little talk, that we change our mindset around that as well. Quietly in the background, a lot of renewables have been installed in this country. They've brought about a different way of operating our power system, and they're going to be dictating to us in the future how this power system will operate. I'm not going to dig into all the detail, but just a quick snapshot of October 2024. These were the outputs from the different technologies. We've got the wind generation, which is shown in red. I think I'll draw your attention to the bottom graph. The wind generation is in red, and you can see it's fairly erratic. October is still an in-between season month. I'll show you some of the characteristics for the summer and the winter months in true fashion. And then you'll see the green, which is the grid-connected solar PV. Again, quite regular, obviously picking up towards noon and peaking at noon each day. And then on top of that, we've got the concentrated solar power, which also can run slightly after sunset. Many of those plants have storage. And you can see the variability of the renewables. So let's dig into that a little bit more in more detail. We've currently got 500 megawatts of concentrated solar power connected to this grid. We have almost 2,300 megawatts of grid-connected PV. Now, I'm not talking about what's on commercial buildings, on what's commercial homes. This is the grid-connected PV through the REAP program. So we've got 3,500 megawatts of wind generation connected in the country. We've now got these new hybrid plants, which as a system operator are fantastic. renewable plants that we are actually able to dispatch because they do have storage. And in total, grid connected, we have about 6,400 megawatts of renewable plants. I think the story that most people haven't noticed is that we have 6,165 megawatts of behind the meter PV. We refer to it as rooftop PV, but this is PV that has been installed on top of commercial buildings, shopping centers, residences, and so on, some of them on industrial plants. Behind the meter, privately installed by different customers across the country. That is a huge number. Given that we've been running the renewable programs from government for some time now, we have a massive uptake of behind the meter PV. We've put on about 3,800 megawatts in 24 months. That's almost the size of a Medupi. All right, we can, as I say, we can dispatch that 150. That's great for us as a system operator. It gives us more flexibility. The highest output that we've had instantaneously was on the 15th of September 2023. We actually provided 5,130 megawatts into this grid from renewables. That is a significant number. And then the maximum that percentage-wise that we've actually supplied this country, 21.8% of the power into the grid was supplied from renewables, and that happened on the 20th of February 2023. As we start to bring on more plant, we expect to see these numbers increase. The one thing that does concern us as a system operator is we track the amount of renewables from one evening peak to the next evening peak. So roughly 1,800 every in the evenings. We look at what the change was from one evening peak to the next evening peak. Now the reason that this is important is because that's the highest demand of the day, and we have to make sure that we have sufficient plant to supply that demand. From the 12th of August to the 13th of August, there was a change of 2,573 megawatts. Let that number sink in. When we lost those 3 Kusile units, that was just over 2,100 megawatts. So in 24 hours, we had wind, and then we didn't have wind. This is a characteristic of renewables. This is not unfamiliar territory for us as a system operator, and it's certainly not internationally unfamiliar territory. We learn from our colleagues how to deal with these types of, but it does come with some interesting characteristics. This is just a quick graph. It starts in July 2022. This is our estimation of what the rooftop or the behind the meter PV has been doing. So you can see 2022 it was still fairly low, 2,000 megawatts penetration behind the meter, and then that huge ramp up as we saw in 2023, driven largely by government incentives, driven by load shedding, and now up over the 6,000 megawatt mark. So quite an interesting story for South Africa to tell around how we managed our private installations of PV. I wanted to talk a little bit about the characteristics of our wind in this country. It's fascinating to me, and I'm sure that you'll enjoy the story as well. Most of our wind generation is around the western and the eastern coasts. When we have summer temperatures across the country, we get in the evenings the offshore winds starting to blow, and those then obviously turn the turbines, and we get a very high generation from the wind generators. If you have a look, I hope you can see from the back, the purple graph there is a typical profile of what our daily profile looks like, our demand. So we have a peak in the morning, we have a peak in the evening, and during the summer periods, because of the geography and where the wind turbines are situated, the increase of wind generation increases towards our evening peak. So they both coincide with sunset. All right. You could not have sat down and designed this better. It is absolutely perfect. It fits our demand profile perfectly. Both of them driven by sunset, and of course that's why they coincide. And for 8 months of the year, that's the type of wind profile that we enjoy. Very predictable, and certainly fits our demand profile almost perfectly. Then we have winter. Alright, so we're down in the Cape here, and you guys, I don't have to tell you anything about cold fronts. All right, so as we have these cold fronts coming up through the Western and the Eastern Cape, again, all our wind turbines are mostly situated in those areas. As that cold front comes through, the winds blow the turbines and we get a very high output of wind generation. And you can see this, I've given an example. So you can see there's an increase, that black line increasing to almost 2,500, 2,700 megawatts. So almost all the wind output is coming through. As that cold front moves, behind it there's a low pressure trough. And as it moves past the wind turbines, there's no wind. And that wind drops off. And so we can see sometimes up to about a 2,000, 2,300 megawatt drop. And in this case, it was over a 72-hour period. What that means as a system operator is that we have incredible generation from the wind. It then drops off and we have to then find other generators, other sources of generation to dispatch to supply the demand of the country. The one cruel part of all of this, and those of you who live in Gauteng will be very familiar with this, as that cold front passes the Eastern and Western Capes and those turbines stop generating, that cold weather reaches Gauteng. Gauteng is a very small province, densely populated, very high demand, and the cold weather drives up that demand. So not only do we lose 2,000 to 2,500 megawatts of wind generation, we also increase our demand in Gauteng up to sometimes 2,000 megawatts, and we thus end up with this massive deficit. And again, it's these types of issues that we're going to have to deal with in the future. We're going to have flexible plants, such as open cycle gas turbines, such as gas turbines, where we can start them up quickly, run them for a short period, and shut them down again. This is a really graphic illustration of what happened on Halloween 2023. The blue curve that you see there is the demand for the day. At 3 o'clock in the morning, our demand is at its minimum. Most people are sleeping. And when I say at a minimum, I think, again, as South Africans, we need to understand our minimum for this period was 19,000 megawatts. We are a very, very large power system. As we ramped into the morning peak, it was a pretty normal day, but it was overcast and slightly cooler across the whole country. And you can see that blue curve, the demand stayed flat the entire day. Very little support from PV across the country. That 6,100 megawatts of rooftop PV or behind the meter PV, we didn't benefit from that that day. All right. And you can see the flat profile which had to then be supplied from the grid. The very next day, the 1st of November, it was a sunny day, pleasant day, and lots of abundant solar radiation across the country. And you can see the difference in the profile. About a 4,500 megawatt difference in that profile. And this is one of the things that, again, as South Africans, we're going to have to deal with. As a system operator, we're going to have to come to terms with. There are periods, like that blue period there, where people who are normally looking after themselves with their PV behind the meter, there will be periods where there will be overcast weather. There will be periods where the entire country will be overcast. There will be periods where the wind doesn't blow as much as it should. And they're going to come back to the grid and they're going to come and draw down from the grid. And that's exactly what we're seeing on that blue graph there, where the PV wasn't working for the privates. They came back to the grid and drew down from the grid. And under those circumstances, we as system operator need to make sure we have the reserves to be able to service that customer. A bit of a look into the future. Again, not everybody's familiar with the outlooks for each season, but we start off with the installed capacity of the IPPs and the Eskom generators. From there, we do a forecast of what we believe the demand will be for every hour of the period that we're looking at. In this case, it was the summer period. We then also look at what the generation outage requirements are for maintenance. And we then, because of the volatility that I showed you earlier on, the volatility in the unplanned unavailability, we do some scenario planning around that. And we then test what the adequacy of this network will be, how much load shedding might be required at different levels, and how much diesel we may have to burn to supplement supply to the grid. The forecast, we are going into towards the December period. There will be a break in the industrial, a lot of industrials will shut down, and so you can see at the moment our peak demand is just over 27,000 megawatts, dropping down towards the Christmas period and the New Year period. we will drop down as low as 23,000 megawatts. And in fact, we'll expect the minimum for the year to be around about 17,000 megawatts. As we pick up going into January, by the 3rd or the 4th week of January, we expect to be back up at the 27,000 megawatt mark. So we're going to have a dip here. We'll obviously take that opportunity to do a bit more maintenance while those generators are not needed. If we put all of that into a melting pot and we look at the three different scenarios, so let me just talk you through this table. From the left, you've got the month. We've then got the peak demand for each of those months that we expect. We've then got the base case scenario, that 13,000 megawatts of unplanned unavailability I was talking about. We then, based on that, on the base case, we can predict how much load shedding might be needed, and I'm sure it'll make you smile to see zero load shedding required in the base case. Going through to the amount of OCGTs that we might need. The first column is energy, gigawatt hours. The second one is millions of rands. And just a reminder that the base case at 13,000 megawatts is still above where we are operating on at average. On average, we're operating at about 11,500 megawatts, so we are still way below the scenario. Because of that, I'm not going to go to the other scenarios. I think that they don't bear, or they shouldn't take our time talking about them today. Madam Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for giving us some insights as to what is happening at the systems operator, and also to try and clarify some of the questions around the performance of renewables. How do they come in and where do they assist the system, in times of load shedding, also in times of where, for instance, we don't need to tap into the OCGTs, spend more money and all of that. So thank you for that, and also showing the peak in terms of the performance of renewables at certain times. I think that's also is very important. I think it's also important in investing in technology, that will make sure that that energy that is generated from those non-dispatchable technologies can get stored so that it can be utilized later, and also to balance the system as well. Thank you very much for taking us through that. At this point in time, I would like to invite the members of the subcommittee to ask some questions. I would like to start from my left this time around. Ms. Simane, may you please ask your questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. No, I'm good.
Thank you very much. Going to Advocate Sitole. Oh, thank you. Mr. Mkiza.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks to the two presenters. Much appreciated. I would like to just start off with the Kasim side. Mr. Kasim, you right at the beginning you talk about rebasing the cost. To what does that fully entail? Does it also include the re-rating of assets? The issue of the revaluation of assets, because look at your RAB, it's about 1 trillion. How does that link up with the EAF? Because I think that at some stage one should consider that in terms of linking the asset value, because yes, the current cost of replacing an asset with its modern equivalent asset is what the methodology in section 6 referred to. It refers to that, but the challenge is if you got a unit running at 58%, would you talk of a replacement value as if you are talking to an asset that is 100%? In other words, so it's 95 sort of percentage if one looks at the EAF. So if you can just reflect on that, because I think that somehow matters, like I would raise the issue in Cape Town, that such matters of like EAF, they've got other implications, and in terms of having the application consistent and in sync, one should be able to talk the same language throughout the application. And then I think on the coal benchmarking, the coal cost, you had indicated that there are other costs that you must incur, because now you're looking at mines, and it's become becoming more expensive because you first of all run with the cheap the mines that are cheap to extract, when it is still cheaper to extract, and then you go more expensive later on. But if there are some delays that are decisions of the shareholder or decisions of the company, why should the consumer then bear the brunt thereof? And also, I think I'm looking at engagement between the technical teams regarding the coal benchmarking. I think that is important without really talking to it here. And then I think the same with the peak demand, to say what would one then say it relates to, what EAF then would relate to in general. We need to be able to look at that. Lastly, I think there's that slide that from NTSA, that slide that shows the differential in demand. It will require a more intense engagement between the NERSA technical team and ESCOM technical team in terms of looking at ancillary services to see how that can be done most optimally, taking due regard of the needs of the customer, the sustainability of NTSA/ESCOM and the country as such. I'll leave it at that, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Mr. Bukula?
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Kasim, I think in page 16 of the application you talk about the 10 negotiated pricing agreements included, resulting in a 5.7% price increase. What we're going to request from you is really a breakdown around both your fixed and variable costs. I mean, it may not be something you do now that then results in this increase in that. And also the other part of it, if you could assist with showing that if those NPAs were not put in place, which would mean that if those entities would close, what would then be the impact or the effect of that? If you could provide us with that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bukula. I also do have some questions of clarity. I would like to start off with the issue of curtailment that you mentioned in the presentation, especially where it is indicated that it happened at least 8 times in this year. I'm not sure which year it is, whether it is 23-24 or 24-25, but I would like to understand how that was done in terms of the cost or the impact on the consumer, to the extent that those plants were ready to dispatch the power and that power was therefore curtailed. Surely there's a cost, and whether that cost then is included in the revenue that ESCOM is requesting, or whether it is something that ESCOM will claim through the RCA. But nevertheless, I'm just looking at the presentation, at least for 2025-2026, the extent to which you included the cost pertaining to curtailment. The second question that I would like you to clarify, it relates to the issue of the RAB. Already the colleague of mine, Mr. Mkhize, has already indicated, the amount, which is almost $1 trillion. That's quite huge, especially given the fact that the method that we are using is one that obviously says this old horse or this car that we bought in 1963 can perform as good as the Mercedes-Benz that has been manufactured today. Obviously, that will require us to look at whether indeed the performance as well as efficiency will actually give us those desired results or not. So what we are trying to ascertain here is the statement that you made in your presentation, where you indicated that actually it looks like it's a regulator who benchmarked. It's not your true cost, and it's not your direct expense. Can you clarify and unpack that statement? Because I think it will be fair for the consumers also to understand, so that from our side we are not seen to have, give you something that you don't deserve, even to the extent that we may want to benchmark just to test, the way that you operate, but it would not mean that we would not take into account your true cost. So please, can you explain that statement and also show where are your costs, so that we can see the benchmarked figure compared to the actual expense and the value of the asset that you are utilizing, if you can do that. I would also want to request ESCOM, especially in terms of progress here as we move along, so that we can test certain things during these public hearings, particularly the fact that we have raised certain concerns with regards to the declining sales, because it's not a good picture to see the declining sales whilst the coal utilization is increasing. So if you are going to burn more coal, one will expect that the output also increases, and therefore even the sales would increase. Can you tell us why is it that the sales will decrease but your cost of producing electricity is going up, and also your coal burn? Can you explain that? What are the constraints from your side? Because these constraints from a perspective of your capacity or from the supply side are not reflected in here. What you have told us is that you as part of your strategy, you want to improve performance, you want to improve efficiency. Now, it cannot be efficiency if your cost is going up, but what comes out is less. Because then if that happens, it means therefore consumers must therefore pay the shortfall of the sales targets. So we can't then pop in to say do this because we are going to benefit at the end of the day from the production, but we're getting less. Can you just also indicate whether there is any linkage between the high price, the increase in the price, as well as the sales itself, because you have not at least given us some insights there with regards to the price elasticity of demand, just to test the sensitivity of customers, especially if you are saying if we're now facing a situation of potential increase of 36%. Yes, we understand that there is no alternative supplier that can supply electricity, on a sustainable basis, on a reliable basis at the moment. So people, obviously, they are captured into one sort of monopoly supplier, if one were to look into that, and it is by virtue of the market structure that we have. And so it will be inelastic. But even if it is inelastic, the consumption levels, surely they will respond to a high price increase. People would not stop using electricity, but the extent of consumption, and that is not what is coming out of the presentation, so that we can see this. And also remember that you have indicated to us that you have spoken to like your 10 top customers, but what we are not getting, and that was perhaps a year ago. So we would want to understand whether these customers will still buy the same levels or consume the same level of electricity if now the price is going to go up by 36%. If you can kindly do so. The last thing that I would like to request as well, linked to the question of whether there will be a tip-off in the market, such that it will affect your sales. I think that it will be fair that we get that kind of analysis, because you're projecting what is going to happen in the market, as opposed to being a monopolist that will say, we sit back, we know that they're going to get it even if we increase the price at 40%. So we're trying to also look into that economic reasoning as to what is going to happen, so that you can justify the application before us. So if you can kindly also just submit to us on the issue of affordability, as you know that it has been a topical issue. So if you can kindly submit some analysis as ESCOM, so that you play out some scenarios showing some sensitivity to the consumers and people that have been making some calls with regards to affordability analysis. Can you take some of these economic factors into consideration? Because there is an issue of willingness to supply and willingness to purchase, or the demand. Now, the issue of the ability, to pay is an issue. So you need to factor in that economic consideration and do an analysis, and then in the subsequent hearings, if you can kindly also present us with that, because we do also need that kind of sensitivity from your side. I would like to stop there at the moment. Yes, I think that will be the questions for now, just to add on what we have indicated. And just lastly, can you now in the coming hearings, please present us with scenarios that will now, because you can tell, remember we are also going along with the fact that you want to improve efficiency and performance. So we also ask for the production plan, so that we can see as you improve the efficiency and your high performance. We expect your high performance not to be sitting at 70% or 63% EAF. So we expect it to increase a little bit. So can you then also just factor in that in your presentation, so that we build from these engagements as we go along, if that you can take into consideration in your presentations going further. The issue of the 4,000 megawatts uncertainty, surely that can be there can be some planning around that as to how you can ameliorate the impact of that, or how you can address it in a way that is not going to be detrimental to the consumer but also to ESCOM. Can you please also just address us on that issue going forward in terms of managing all of this risk and making sure that you will still be in a position to provide the service as expected? Thank you very much, Mr. Kasim. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson and members. Chair, I'll ask Gav to quickly talk on curtailment and maybe the 4,000, and then obviously we'll engage with generation and come back to a subsequent. And I'll address some questions that I can today. Obviously, we take note of this, and subsequent meetings we'll come back with the other issues like the scenarios, the elasticity studies where our treasurer will present, and then the other colleagues that will support them. But I think on the curtailment, I think it was 38 and what happens. I have an understanding, but let him respond and I can come in. And I'll talk a bit on the RAB, but there'll be more detail we'll come back to.
Thanks for the question, Chairperson. Maybe just bring everybody up to speed of what the curtailment means. So effectively what it means is the system operator gives an instruction either to a wind farm or to a PV farm to reduce their output. This happens because in some instances, and it's usually at 3 o'clock in the morning or at 12 o'clock during the day, when we have an excess of capacity on the system, and that could be because we've got too much renewables or the demand is low for whatever reason, it is impractical to shut down the coal plants. And so we do shut down things like pump storage. We put them into pumping mode, and we try and store as much of that energy as possible. But the reason it's impractical to shut down a coal generator is it takes many hours to shut down a coal generator and takes many more hours to start it up again. And so to try and shut it down for, let's say, 3 or 4 hours during the middle of the night or 3 or 4 hours during the middle of the day is impractical. And this again, it comes back to what we call flexibility. We need generators that can switch on and off. Right now, our best option, once we've put in all the pumping and storage facilities that we have available to us, the next best flexible option is to reduce the output of the PV or the wind generators.
think you were just explaining the process. Can you just tell us the cost that is associated with that?
Interestingly enough, Chairperson, we are interrupting or curtailing plant that has been contracted via the REAP programs. And effectively, when they are curtailed, they get paid. So it's a take-or-pay contract, those particular contracts. So the cost is it's a net zero cost to the country.
I'm not going to belabor the point, but obviously curtailment has some cost, and that cost has to be recovered, even if there's no electricity that has been generated. And when they are paid from the tariffs, right?
Correct.
Yes. So that's what I'm trying to ascertain here, to say from the revenue that you have applied for, what is the cost of that? If you can be transparent with regards to the curtailment cost.
Okay.
That's all that we're asking. If it's not here, if you can note that, I'm not expecting you to have the figure on top of your head. All that we want is transparency in terms of the curtailment cost, because we know that it is, output that has not been utilized. Nobody used it. We cut back, it was ready to be dispatched, but it could not be dispatched. Then they need to pay irrespective, right? So we just want to understand how that has been factored into the application.
Certainly, I will do that.
Thank you.
Chairperson, and the other question around the 4,000 megawatts of volatility and how we can reduce that. I think this is really a technical question, and we have seen this number coming down slowly. It's got to do with the maintenance and the gains that are being made by Generation Group on the reliability of the generators. We have had weeks in the past where that number has gone as high as 5,200 megawatts of volatility. So we are seeing slow gains, but it will take time as long as we need to get in there and do maintenance on those generators. Thanks.
Chair, if I respond briefly on the RAB, but we'll come back with more detail to Mr. Mkize's question. I think it's also your question, Chair, that supplemented that. I think firstly the question about benchmarks. When we submit our revalued depreciated asset base, it's a study that is done for Eskom, and it's based on benchmarks. That's the first point I want to make. Our understanding is for NERSA to also assess those benchmarks and then decide what is the appropriate RAB. So that's the first thing. The part about actual cost. So what you do, you do this benchmark analysis, and you say, this is your benchmark analysis for all these plants at this unit cost, and that goes into the asset base. But then you basically discount it for its age, to say it's not a brand new plant, it's 40 years old or 30 years old, and that's the starting point. Over and above that, Chair, as we then add more capacity and infrastructure based on the commissioning dates, that's where a lot of the actual costs will come through in terms of the revalued asset base. Chair, the issue of, I think, EAF linked to asset base and performance. Our understanding of the rules in terms of the methodology is the asset available to be used within the next 12 months? And that's what, for us, our understanding then qualifies in terms of going into the asset base. Then, based on whether you utilize that asset at a 40% EAF or a 50 or 70% EAF, based on the system that Gav has mentioned, that would be subject to many factors. But the trick is that unit available during the course of the next 12 months to be included in the asset base? That's our understanding, but we will go back and do more work and come and present to the members. To Mr. Bakula's question, the details around the NPAs, Mr. Bakula will come back on that. And then also on affordability, we'll do analysis on what Eskom puts forward and what we in control and what we can offer consumers. But like I mentioned, in Cape Town, there's other elements that municipalities have to come to the party in terms of affordability. We'll do that, Chair, and then you've also asked us to do the scenarios. I think we'll also go back with generation to deal with that 4,000 gap as Gav has initially alluded to. And maybe, Chair, you, if I may, ask Dan Mashiko just quickly talk on coal. He can just swear himself in because I think that was the question. We can always come back on that. Thanks.
By the way, it has expired in Cape Town.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. May you please state your name and your designation at ESCOM?
Thank you. My name is Dan Mashiko. I'm the General Manager, Primary Energy in ESCOM.
You may proceed, sir.
Yeah. Chair, we've taken note of what you asked for, that as we progress through the hearings, we do include, the additional information, especially around coal cost, like benchmarking or how we go around it. Yesterday, I made an undertaking that we're gonna do a deep dive, on coal, the entire process, and we will bring that particular, lens on how we do that. We do have, some, international companies that do benchmark. Sometimes difficult because not everybody wants to participate, in benchmarking, especially the trading, mining operation. But we do have that, and we'll explain how we do our own, coal procurement, because it's a much more detail intense, a one-on-one, engagement with the mining operations where we intrinsically look at, each mine. We do benchmark processes. We use the same mining models, that the miners are utilizing, to get to that. But we'll include that whole process, when we look at the deep dives and answer the question, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Chair, we'll also come back on the customer analysis around sales and its implications of the 36%. I think we made notes of that, and in closing we can just also summarize. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's the end of the presentation. All right, thank you. All right, that is the end of the presentation from ESCOM. We apologize for the delay, but we will catch up as we move along. We would like to call upon Eastern Cape Combined Environmental Forum. We've got the name of Melikaya Blani. Shall we start? Mr. Mabunda, we ready? Okay. Ma'am, we've already? Okay. Just hold on, sis.
Okay.
May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to provide to the panel today is the truth and the whole truth?
Kunjalo sis.
All right, ndicela uthethe amagama wakho apheleleyo for the record. Ne community of obuya kuyo.
Okay. My name is Linda Festile from Eastern Cape Combined Environmental Forum. But ngokokuhlala nilapha eZwide ndihamba nosisi ecam kwam andifuna ungatsho.
Sumcela ukuthi ufungafuni ngatsho. Sumcela mntasi. Sumcela nzamfungisa naye.
Okay.
All right.
Umelikaya Blani akakho so ndime ezinyaweni zakhe.
All right, kuyakulungile sisi. All right, sacela usisi naye asonde lapha embokweni. Ngathi umfutshane bazacela bakulungiselele.
Okay.
Walter ngicela umlungiselele.
Okay. Enkosi sihlalo.
Bama kancinci ke mama. Alright, ndicela ukufungisa kuqala, ndicela uphakamise isandla sakho sasekunene. Uyafunga mama ke ukubana ubungqina uzawuthi ububeke phambi kwale panel namhlanje izabe iyinyaniso nenyaniso kuphela.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
Ndicela kusixela amagama wakho.
Igama lami ndinguNomvula Jack waseTinarha, ndililungu le ECCF, Eastern Cape Environmental and Climate Change Forum.
All right.
Suka eTinarha.
All right, no, okay, the two of you, I'm not part of the mandate. I didn't give you mandate to represent me here, but you can state your views.
Ndiyabulela kusihlalo kuba ixesha ndicinga into yoba lincinci endilijongileyo, ndicela ukhawulezisa sihlalo. Thina sisuka kwi-Eastern Cape Combined Environmental Forum, ngokufutshane kuthiwa yi-ECCF. Sithe ke sofumana into yokuba kuzawuba nale meeting, saphuma sangena ekuhlaleni. Silapha nje simele abahlali because abahlali abakhange ba-afford to come ngenxa yemali, abakhange bakwazi ukuza kule meeting. So ii-views zethu zii-views from the community. Firstly, bathi manditsho that they've got a right of information. Abahlali bafilishe into yokuba i-information ayikhange ifike kubo ngendlela right because they don't afford ukubhaya a newspaper or i-datas. Abahlali badepende kwi-offices of-councillors. Lishwa ke andiboni kwa o-councillors. I'm not sure whether the information iye yafika na kwi-offices of-councillor bethu because asibaboni apha, or else andibazi mhlawumbe o-councillor. So we felt that i-information nersa khange ihambe kakuhle, asiyazi uba kwenzeke ntoni. And then also bathe ndithi ndohlala ndafumanisa uba this public meeting is not public enough. I-public meetings lena ifana as if yi-private meeting. That's my feeling because ndibona umthamo wabantu base-Eastern Cape phakathi kule holo. Kwindaba ye-36% okanye MYPD6, hayi kuthiwe mandithi we don't afford. Asinayo singabahlali base-Eastern Cape Combined Environmental Forum, singabahlali base-Zwide. We don't afford because kaloku remember i-poverty. Bathe mandithethe nge-poverty that masikuxelele nesa that kwi-area esuka kuzo kunazindlu hlala abantwana, a child-headed household that abangaphangeliyo. Parents died long time ago nge-COVID time, so abantwana bahleli bodwa, they don't afford lona umbane ukhoyo, so they won't afford umbane ozawube uyadura uphinde unyuke. Also kuconsiderishwe that i-unemployment rate e-Eastern Cape, unemployment rate abantu abasasebenze e-Eastern Cape kuthiwe masiyivakalise loo nto. Baxana ke ngoku kuzawunyuswa umbane benga-afodi lona umbane we-R100, I think it's 40 if ndibiza kakuhle, 40 kilowatts if it's not 38 ngoku. And also bayakhalaza that load shedding, power cuts, xa siyibuza kuthiwa infrastructure problem. I-infrastructure problem ke iyingxaki kuthi kwi-area esikuhlala kuyo. 2022 kune-cables okokoko zazibhabha on top of the soil or on top of the ground kwi-area endisuka kuyo. Those cables ezibhabha ngaphezulu ziyazonzakalisa izinja zethu, ngenye imini zakonzakalisa abantwana bethu. We don't know whether u-Eskom knows that ii-cables zakhe zibhabha ngaphandle. So we don't know. Ndiyavakala ke? So we don't know that Eskom is aware that i-cables zakhe zi on top of umhlaba. And also i-flood ziyawucima umbane wethu, so end up i-appliances zisonakala. We don't know whether Eskom is aware about that, Nersa, but yena keep on asking i-raise each and every 3 years. Sitasnayo. And then since sinengxaki ke yokublokelwa umbane siblokelwa umbane because we are not working, we don't afford even a loaf of bread or 2 meals a day. Tina kuthi to have 2 meals a day, it's a luxury up on Suka Khona. We depend on soup kitchens, on NGOs with soup kitchens. I'm one of them. I'm not afraid that I do not afford 2 meals a day. And also as an activist, ndiyatsho ukuthi the solar izasebenzela. I-solar systems asebenzela. Ukuba ngaba siyacela ke kule nto yena ezocela u36%, thina siyacela into ba unblock imibane yethu. Asibethe nge-flat rate ezaba affordable. Flat rate nabuthi masibhatala 75 rand ngenyanga mhlawumbe. I-flat rate ezaba affordable. And also uNERSA thina asiyivumi MYPD6 and kule minyaka uMYPD5 I believe bekunyuswa ngoko. Wenze ntoni transparency, wenze ntoni ngalamali? Where is the money? Because asiyiboni abavakali ngoku sithetha apha. U-Eskom uyalutharisha. U-Eskom is failing abantu basemzansi. Always we see face i-power cuts. U-Eskom is tired. Eskom, please stop lootering. Ipokoto zethu zi-empty. We don't have imali. Eskom, you are killing us. You are a silent killer, Eskom. Eskom always want increase, but we don't see the mali ba iyapina. Ngoku we are facing i-power cuts, especially when it's raining. Asivumi, we don't afford. We don't give i-permission. Asinikezeli i-permission sisi. Chairperson, Tina apha Eastern Cape asinikezeli. Eskom, you are failing us. Eskom, you are failures. I'm not afraid to go to Eskom, you are failure, because Tina, we are cooking outside. We have to fetch wood. A location, I have to fetch wood so that abantwana bambatye. So Eskom, you don't deserve 36%. Thank you.
Usisi yankwantyana.
Ndifuna nje ukwaleka kwinto ethethwe sisithethe esisuka apha. Mna ndisuka eTinarha. iTinarha ke elikukudala lwathwaqwa yi-load shedding. Yajika yakwathiwa yi-load reduction. Mna ndingumama omele abantwana bam abangaphangeliyo. Abantwana bam bano grade 12, omnye uno N6 kwi-management assistant, bonke baxhomekeke kuma baphangeli. Imagine ke ngoku xa u-Eskom ezawunyusa kulo mbane kulo ndingawu-affordiyo, kulo singawufumaniyo uhlala umke sihlale ngaphandle kwemibane. Funeka thina sifune iinkuni singomama ngoba kaloku sinenimba yabantwana bethu. Uyawubasa phandle uqhunyuselwe ngulaa mlilo, mlilo mqhumo lo uzawubuya ngawo ube ne-TB. Wena ndingumama mna abantwana bam bengaphangeli. So kukho amakhaya ke pha esiwabonayo thina anabantwana, abantwana abasolekela bashiywe ngabazali, abantwana baphangeli, abantwana bajonge abanye abantwana bangabazali babantwana bengabantwana nabo. So kukoku kunyuka ke kunyuswa kombane ngu-Eskom, thina asi-afford le meko sikuyo ngoku singabazali siyabethakala. Okokugqibela uNobuhle usandawuthwaqwa ngoku zii-floods. Yayi-shut down kwaNobuhle, kwacima kwaloo mibane. Owethu umbane kwaNobuhle bakukho umoya omkhulu uyemka. Ukuba kukho imvula sele incinci lithontsana umbane uyemka, siyahlala thina sihlala iveki singenambane. So kule meko yonyuswa kombane thina ayizusisebenzela kwaNobuhle kakhulu eTinarha, ngoba ngoku kwaNobuhle sibethwa nayitraffic ngoku indlela esisafarisha ngayo ukungena kwaNobuhle. Nobungangena mhlawumbi ungene apha eBrokhweni ungene ngo-2, uyawungena elokishini uyawungena mhlawumbi ngo-4. Sikuloo meko thina kuba mnyama, icrime iphezulu, ucima kombane kukho abantu kuthiwa ngamaphara. Ngabantwana bethu aba, ngabantwana bethu kuba abaphangeli. Andifuni ke ukuthetha kakhulu, mna ndithi ke ngoku oku kunyuswa kombane ngu-Eskom lo 36% uyawusinzimela thina kakhulu. Andimvumi mna, ndingumzali obethakalayo endiphila ngemali encinci, andizukwazi uafoda. Enkosi kakhulu.
Niyabaleka nalinda. Alright, ndifuna uchekisha nje mhlawumbi kukho imiyalezo okanye imibuzo. Ukhona umbuzo Simane?
Thank you. Enkosi mhlali ngaphambili. Enkosi Mama Linda nomama Nomvula. Mina ndifuna ubuza uMama Linda ubusithi inkcukacha zifiki kuni. Ingaba zezimemo ezingafikiyo kanye application kaEskom. Then owesibini uthe ayo public hearing le is a private hearing. Into nedalba utsho.
Okay, enkosi ke sis. I-information ayifiki because thina i-information silindele kwi-office zo-councillor. We don't afford i-data into basingene ko-Facebook or senze i-emails senze yonke laa nto sibe nofumana iinkcukacha zale meeting. Ndicinga into yoba xa kuthiwa yi-public unless mna ndazi rongo xa iyi-public yi-meeting e-public yabahlali but ngoku ndifumanisa into yoba abahlali balapho ndisuka khona okanye abahlali baseNelson Mandela Metro abakho ngangale room. That's why ndisithi i-private. And nam andiyifumenanga kwa kwi-office ndiyifumana because ndingumntu we-NGOs ndihambe ndikhangela ndifukuza into yokutya. So that's why ndisithi this is not public enough.
Right, thank you very much. Kunenye question ke from Advocate Sithole.
Siyabonga ma'am with the presentation. I think you indicated with the community has sent you with a request that there should be a flat rate that would be affordable to members of the community. Is there any proposal as to what that flat rate should be?
No, awabalo wanga amanani kuthiwe just ukuba ngaba uEskom unokhe angene acime yonke andithi siblokelwe thina we don't have umbani. Our boxes are blocked because as afford asikwazi uthenga umbani and then i-bills zethu zi-high. So if uEskom unokhe aqale ngokucima imibane yethu then i-second round decide ukwenza i-flat rate that will be affordable kubantu bethu.
All right, no.
At least akuzofana nalento iyenzekayo yokutswikila, at least uzofumana something than ukungafumani.
Ungazixeli ke wena mntu weviva. All right, okay, sinivile kakhulu. I think we take the issue of consultations seriously and also maybe the medium yokubana how do we notify uluntu about indibano ezifana lezi because these indibano zoluntu public hearings, so we will improve from our side as well in making sure that we don't just use newspapers as ngathi fancy. We also announce these things we radio stations ezimanyelwa ngabantu ebokuhlala, you know, umhlobo wenene and other radio stations, Algoa radio stations and all of that, so that people can be aware of consultations ezenziwa nguNERSA nendibano ezawuthi zibe khona nokubana zithini i-locations zezo ndibano. So we will improve from our side. We really take it seriously, that kind of input, and we take it as improvement. Some of the issues that you have stated here are issues that are real, but ke asikhuthazi into bana makwenziwe uyiviva kumane kutswikile bekuthiwe bano update i-meters. Ninikwe i-date nizawuphinda vele nitywatyushwe kakhulu ngoku ngalamba weza meters bekuthiwe bazihambe ziyokulungiswa ziyo-update. Nibhatale Linda. Bye-bye. Sikhula naye kuLinda ke. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving along with our presentations. We now have Pandora Mkukulwa from WECCF. Okay, may you please raise your right hand, ma'am? If you can also just step forward so that you make sure that we can hear you. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and the community that you come from.
Igama lami nguPandora wakwamguqulwa. Ndiphuma kwa-Eastern Cape Environment Combined kwicala lomama siyimibutho ye-NPOs sikho yi-1, that's why it's Eastern Cape Combined, the NPOs ezininzi ndithunywa ngabo ke apha.
Okay, thank you very much. Ndicela ufungisa wesibini. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your name for the record.
Igama lami nguXolelwa wakwaMagalakanqa, mna ndisuka kwaNobuhle eTinarha, ndikuyi-Woman in Energy and Climate Change yalapha e-Eastern Cape, equka njengoba ugxa wam sesitsho, iquka iidolophu ezininzi ezilapha e-Eastern Cape ezigodi iforum yomama.
Alright, inkosi kakhulu. Ndicela niqalise ke nge-presentation yenu.
Ndibulisa kumntu wonke olapho bethunana. Nanjengokubana ndithunywe ngulo mbutho wam, uthi mandizothi kuNERSA uyazicela, uyagoba ngamadolo ukubana makathethe no-Eskom. U-Eskom izinto asenzela zona zibuhlungu kakhulu. Nanjengomama abarhoqa isidima sabo phantsi, abaya basayo phandle ngenxa engabikho mbane ekuhlaleni for 3 months kungaziwa into yokubana umbane uyephi. Sicela into yobana u-Eskom alungise izinto, enze izinto ngendlela. U-Eskom uyasifeyila ngokubana u-Eskom last month kubekho umuntu ozixhomileyo apha eMagxaki, ndingasezwide uzixhomile lamfana kwiipali zaka-Eskom ezinkulu. Ndisafilish into yokubana if u-Eskom ebebiyele laa ndawo ipha ebakhwetheni nezapali, laa ngozi ngeyenzekanga kulaa mntana, ngengayanga wayozixhoma phaya, mowasezinyoka laa mntana. Sifilish into yokubana singomama base-Eastern Cape Combined, njengobana singile mibutho nezi-NPO senza i-wonder bags, sipheka kuzo because sinqatyelwe ngumbane, asinanto yopheka kodwa kwenzeke. Siyamcela ke u-Eskom into yokubana eli nani le-38% athi masithathe asizokwazi kuba kaloku asi-afford. Ngoku yena into ayenzayo usikhethisa ukutya okanye umbane. Masithenge umbane okanye sithenge ukutya. It's given we're gonna buy food because we don't have money to buy electricity. At least inkuni siyazichola eforest to cook. Sizama ukuthi kuwe ke NERSA khathethe no-Eskom kwaye naye athethe kunye nalamaqela ahambisana nawo for uthengisela umbane, azi ukuthi asivi kamandi singomama. Isidima sethu sirhuqa imihla nezolo kwaye nebusiness ngoku azifumani nto ngenxa into yokubana siyacinezeleleka nazo. Akho business, akho ngqesho kubantwana bethu. Ndiyacela ke ngicela unikela ke umngane wami.
Thank you very much.
Ndiphinde ndibulise kwakhona kusihlalo, ndibulise kwi-panelist, ndibulise nakwindlu yonke iphelele eziba nditshilo ndinguXolelwa waseTinarha. Mna ke andizophinda-phinda into beseyithethiwe uba bendikwelo nam uba kuye kwanzimela even ufilisha the application form besithunyelwe via i-email, sendithumele i-email, so xa funeke ndiphinde ndabuyela nto because ndiyenza apha efowunini nakhompyutha isokolisele uba mandifilishe in the form ndiyiphinde ndiyisende back. So sicela kube lula. Okwesibini, as babe ndibukele i-presentation yaka-Eskom, the jargon khange ndikwazi even ingqondo yam isithi because nditshaya u-understanda yonke loo nto eza charts, it's just colors, it's just draft, it's just lines, izinto singakwazi ukuzi-understanda ncakasana. Ingathi kwixesha lizayo bayenza ibe simpler, sizokwazi nathi as abahlali abalapha kwi-grassroot besikwazi uyi-understanda. Okwesibini, ndiye ndothuka kakhulu mna xa kuthiwa besino-0 days we-load reduction, whereas mna mhlali wakanobuhle ndiyayazi uba i-load shedding khange stope, ijust ijike igama yaba yi-load reduction. Okwesibini, bukwazi uthenga umbane nge-R10 xa ufikileyo phana, ukwazi uba nje just for ulayita. Into yenzekayo ngoku, if uthenga nge-R10 funeka uyazi uba i-R5 iya kumasipala ibhatala amanzi, i-R5 le uzawulayita ngayo. So Eskom usilapha wasiniki presentation yakhe wathi uthethile noSalga so kukho imunicipality but akacacisanga ncakasana ba baza kuyisombulula njani lengxaki ba umasipala batyala instead of la mali iphuma kwakuthi bathenge bombane. So ngoku imagine xa uzawunyuka umbane nge-36% kwabahlali kuthi esingakwazi uafforda kakade lo mbane ukhona because xa unyukayo umbane awunyukeli thina abahlali bodwa unyukela ii-companies ezisebenza abantu bethu aba ke banelaka bona yosebenza ufumanise ba there is short time so kwa imali le babuya nayo endlini incinci for bamba bathenga lo mbane lo uzodura uduru ngoku xa unyukela 36% uza kunyuka and into abakhala ngayo but there's operating costs abazicalula ngozicalula from i-opinion yomama thina sithi xa Eskom angenza izinto ngendlela jongo ke infrastructure yabo imbi le nto ikwazi umbane ba ucime xa kunetha amathemfukane thina uyawucima umbane so but bathi bakhona i-maintenance so as umhlali wakanobuhle omna akho maintenance endiyibonayo i-box kwesi strato sam we-14 houses yadubula nje kunetha imvula zonke appliances zethu zatsha from i-street sethu ne-street sebhek azange silungiselelwe nto so ndiyabona kwi-drops zabo bayatsho bayasicacisela into yoba izinga labantu abafumana umbane wamahala lehlile. Reason why abantu abawuthenga umbane because they can't afford to uthenga umbane lihlile not because abantu abafuna umbane wamahala it's because xa ufumana umbane wamahala la 50 labana 50 ufumana ufuna ukuyothenga aqala uzokwazi ufumana liyehla because abantu abaninzi kaloku iviva ngoku akusekho umuntu uthenga umbane bambala 1 or 2 or 3 abantu abathenga umbane that is why ufumaniseka kuba kwi-draft yabo lihlile izinga labantu abafumana umbane hayi because asufuna umbane wamahala because asinayo kwa la 10 rand yothenga lo uzasinika lo wamahala umbane kwezi operation cost yawayatsho ba sinabasebenzi efuneka sibabhatele shine insurance efuneka sibhatele abasebenzi banza kuqala ngoku umbane uzawucima pha kula transform iphaka ekhaya anda uzawuza umuntu azolungisa omnye ufika awujonga nje ufuna uza ebusuku abazaziyo banza bhatale overtime eza cost zezi zifakwa pha kula operating cost ba siza basibhatala istaff sethu 2 there is the cost of the insurance xa ungayilungisiyo infrastructure yakho uyibone bayibolile obviously xa umane uclaim nakwezi insurance zizaziyo the more you claim the more your premiums zakho ziba high the more higher cost ezakwenzeka loo ezaphinde vesichaphazele thina bathengi thina bahlali okwesithathu there is carbon cost ementionwayo phaa the more upheka umbane ngamalahle the more uzawubhatala. That's the obvious thing like so as the Women's Forum we advocating for cleaner energy we're advocating ba sisebenzisa isolar power to sinabe sihlale 3 weeks without umbane tinarha sancedwa yintoni because there is a house and solar panels esikwazi ba at least sikwazi uyocharge ifoni zethu sizokwazi ba sinxulumane nabantu abangaphandle so sithi makubekho lo mbane nje babesho that there is wind turbines there is solar system panels mazize ebahlalini kwenza kuba kuzokuncipha la carbon tax bayibhatalayo kwenza kuzokuncipha neza cost kwenza kuzokuncipha noba bamane besisa kunesa bezocela i-increase enkosi
Nkosi kakhulu yo hayi ngathi liyabethi tinarha apha ngathi liyabethi tinarha apha ndiyalibona ngathi izwide le ngathi niyoyiswa man ndiyaliva itinarha liyavutha straight all right trying to check if there's any question of clarity. I think we are clarified. We've heard all of the issues, including issues of infrastructure maintenance and the fact that even though you contribute to that maintenance through the tariffs, but you don't get the benefit of that. So Eskom must look into that, and also issues of affordability is one of the key issues, and also the level of crime here in the Eastern Cape, especially Gqeberha now, it has increased. It's not like you are in Gauteng. The Nelson Mandela Bay as a whole is very tough, even at schools, lower primary schools. So it's very important that you take the issue of electricity very seriously. Thank you very much. We thank you for your time. We now move on to the next presenter, and we have the name of Ulungile Kyali from Climate Justice Action Group, FC. Lungile Kyali. Molo tata. Uba siza ukumsha?
Hayi. Sokumsha mawu.
Kodwa ke tata awukhabi ukufunga. Ungafunga.
Hayi mama ndikhabile.
Awukhabi into. All right tata. uba wendicela into yoba aphakamise isandla sasekunene. Bawo uyavuma into okokubana into oza kuyithetha apha nobungqina ozawuthi ubunikeze phambi kwale panel izabe iyinyaniso yodwa and inyaniso epheleleyo?
Yebo njalo ma.
Ndiyabulela tata, ndicela into okokubana usichazele igama lakho liphelele.
Ndingulungile Tyali. Ndisuka kwaZakhele. Ndiphantsi kwalo mbutho nam i-Climate Justice Action Group. Singamadoda.
Okay. One ngamadoda. Okay.
Singamadoda.
Sure. Uhamba wedwa tata?
Hayi ndihamba nokawo.
Alright, ndicela utata ke nanjengendlela yokuthetha ke apha utata kathethe enxiba umnqwazi. Khuleke tata nesibuko esi. Nkosi tata. Tata bendicela into okokubana uphakamise isandla sakho sasekunene. Tata uyavuma okokubana ubungqina ozawuthi ubuthethe phambi kwale panel izabe iyinyaniso nenyaniso epheleleyo?
Ndiyavuma.
Ndicela utata sinike igama lakhe.
Igama lami nguFenias ifani nguNkatshuka, ndisuka eJeffreys Bay under iXhorha municipality. But okwangoku ndihamba neqabane lam kwi-climate justice action.
Nkosi tata.
Nkosi.
Nkosi. Ndicela niqelise ke tata usinikeze eyenu ingxelo.
Okokuqala ndifuna uphinda ndibulise. Omama abasuka apha siyayisebenza kunye nabo. Banyanisile lento bayithethayo. Yeko kuba asiafodi umbane. Nangoku sonyuka nathi ngokusingotata asiphangeli akho nto sithatha kuyo. Aso-afodi umbane Eskom makazama ulungisa indlela yokwenza izinto. Asilungiselele umbane wethu ungabi dodlo umbane usoyisa ngokuthiphu. Xana ezawuphinda unyuse uthi masiyithathe phi imali yothenga. Umzekelo thina pha kum sine cooperative pha. Kula cooperative yethu sinombane esiyogenerateayo pha eGaptep yethu. Sine solar pha. Umbane wethu ungena ku Eskom, ungena ku grid ka Eskom, asibhataleki. Kodwa yena uzasinyusela umbane. Ngombane wethu awusebenzisayo thina pha sila cooperation yethu ungabhataliyo ngu-Eskom. Kudala si-aplya akade siphendule. Enkosi.
Just to remind you, remind the audience again that we do have interpretation services. So umntu ke kwezindibano, they will speak the language of their choice, the language they feel comfortable with, and you do have those things that you put here, the headphones. So you will find isiXhosa on channel 1, and then you find English on channel 2, as well as Afrikaans on channel 3. So if you can kindly make use of those if you can't understand or follow what they are saying. Because may you please proceed to that.
Mandiphinde ndizibulisele, mandibulele kakhulu kuNESA uba ethe waziphela ithuba uba sizokwazi ukuphefumla okanye simamele ba uEskom uza nantoni na. Ndizawuqala nje kulamazwi bebekwe ngumama uLinda we-ECCF. Andiyazi noba yiyona i-public participation, andiyazi igama layo ibizwa kanjani. Eziba ndisuka eJeffreys Bay, kufuneka manditravel all the way ndizofika apha. And leyo information andiyifumananga kuba ndiyifumene eJeffreys Bay. Ndiyifumana kuba sihamba kwezi NGOs. If bezingekho kwezi NGOs ngeba nayo le information endinayo namhlanje. So andikho sure noba i-public na okanye i-private. Mhlambe omnye umuntu ke uyawucacisela okanye uNESA okanye uEskom asibulele. Ndifuna uqala nje kancinci kumazwe bebekwe ngumama uSihlalo. Ekhange ndive impendulo ncakasana ku-Eskom. Andilazi igama lesilungu noba ngu-Curtain Coast noba ngubani na uzawunceda umama. But likhona igama belithetha ngecoast yama ngu-Curtain noba ngubani na. And affordability nayo khange ndivu Eskom ezicacisa izinto zoyi-2 bathe bazawuphinda bayohlala bathi baphinde babuye nazo na, which is I believe kuba namhlanje yona issue yethu singabahlali kuku-afford umbane. le uEscom angayibekiyo icace ncakasana bakuzokwenza kantoni affordability yakhona. So I think lo mbuzo lo ushe kujinga uba ndihambe apha engaphendulekanga, that means mina kwi group yami kanye kubahlali endiyakubo ndizabe ndingenayo impendulo yoba ithini kanye because uEscom ndicela angasifeyili ngokusinikeza information, ndicela ba abe clear asicacisele. And even indlela ekuzwa nayo ne-information yindlela apho information yabantu abafundileyo andanoba iyacaca na, because xa kuzobekwa izitshathi ezibekwayo apho kuthethwe uqomba ingathi andikho ngondikhoyo. So information ayicaci, ayikho clear information. Mhlawumbi ngebe i-divide okanye bayi-simplify to the point whereby sizoyi-understand singabahlali ba kuthiwani ngoku, because le bazayila information ewe siyayiva but asiyiva. So icacile loo nto leyo. And ukuza kwindaba le yombane abafuna uba bawunyuselwe okanye unesa abanikeza igunya loba banyusa umbane, ndizoba ngathi ndiphinde into eyi-1. Sithetha umzekelo i-R100 yombane. Xa uthenga umbane nge-R100 unikezela u-40 units. Ndicele bu-40 units uzokuthatha ixesha elingakanani. Izolo bendithenga umbane we-R10 because andi-afford. Ndithenga umbane we-R10 only 4 units. Ndicela uba i-4 units ngebe ayiphelanga ngoku just ukulayita kule holo sikuyo oko siqalile, ngebe ayikapheli i-4 units ngoku. So how much more ke ngoku xa befuna baphinde bavunyelwa mabanyusa umbane? And ndifuna ukuchaphazela indaba yokuba ingathi uEscom xa ethetha ngokunyuswa kombane akabajonga abantu abaphuwa like kwi-communities zethu thina siphuwa, thina singasebenziyo. Ndibonile uthi kwi-social grantors ubanikeza u-50 units wa free eziba abantu mabakwazi ukulayita, but leyo nto leyo iyenzeka. Uba yenzeka kangakanani leyo information iyafika ebantwini kwaba isappose bayifika kubo. So zizinto esijongene nazo abazozithetha ibenhle kubo, which is like Escom, but xa kufika kwi-reality ba iyenzeka nalento kuthethwa ngayo fanele uba yenzeke. Because ungangena door to door uzofanele uba out of 10 yemizi okanye yezindlu ozobuzwa niyawufumana umbane wa free, izothi i-8 asiwufumani because abanayo information bakufuneka senze kanjani ize sifumane leyo mbane lowo wa free. And ukwengeza kancinci nje yoba kulombane sesifika sikuwo ngoku we-R100 kufuneka ubalansise ngoku into sekufuneka bekhona. Besibalansisa ukutya nombane. Uba une-R500 ufuneka uyazi ba okay i-R300 ndithenga ukutya, i-R200 ndithenga umbane, because apha kufuneka ukulayitiwe and lo mbane kufuneka asebenze ukupheka oku kutya. So ndixelele ke ngoku if ever umbane uyenyuka ithini loo nto leyo? Sithatha more mali ekutyeni sizogalela kukila nto embaneni. That means sizoshiyeka silamba. So yipoint leyo mhlambe kufuneka bayivelele bayijonge ba sinengxaki yongasebenzi. Even imisebenzi yethu esiyifumanayo ayikho sustainable. Like izipis job esizifumanayo zibhatala kancinci. Like xa ndisithi mhlambe izipis job also ndikwi-department yo-fishermen like i-National Association of Fishermen. Apha kule coast yase-Eastern Cape le i-economy yalapha iphezulu because of i-fishing. But i-fishing is going down due to climate change esijongene nayo wonke umuntu uyayazi. So we end up like sisebenza 8 months a year, which is a period evumelekileyo ku-Department of Fisheries and Forest bamasebenze for 8 months. But kula 8 months still sinexesha loba singasebenzi due to i-reasons e-climate change, which is the high seas, imimoya emikhulu, i-floods, si-end up singasebenzi. So kula 8 months ivuliweyo si-end up sisebenza i-5 months. Ndixelele ke ngoxa usebenza le 5 months uphinde uthi usemsebenzini kufowunelwe endlini kuthiwa umntwana akafundanga namhlanje because umbane lethu uye waphela. Istress sakho soba usemsebenzini ungafumani cash because thina sisebenza ngecash, asisebenzi nge-standard wages. If awukhethanga unamali, so istress sakho songakhetha emsebenzini sidibana nestress sasendlini ekuthiwa umntana uyifeyilile i-test because khangabe nalo ixesha loyofunda late because umbane bungekho endlini.
So la pressure unayo neza stress unazo zezi mhlambi ke kuhambe kuthiwa otata bayahlukumeza ezindlini zabo because umuntu ufike nepressure ngummangaliso ngapha kufuna imali ngapha imali akayifumani then ngabo Eskom uzokwengeza lo pressure leyo sinayo so andiyazi no bayayijonga nabayeza na down to roots where thina siphila khona because seems like uEskom uphila yedwa like uphila kwelakho ilizwe ebhayi abantu ba-afford abantu ahamba nabo kanye base-South Africa baya-afford xa ndizogqibezela I think indaba yoba ngoku kufuna unyuswa umbane mhlambi ndizayibiza ngoba yenye indawo yenye indlela efundileyo ka-Eskom ubuyisa load shedding I think indlela efundileyo because xa ubuyisa u36% uthi kwaba bantu abaphuwa mabathini mabahlale bengenambane so that ke ngoku Eskom akazuba nayo ucinzelelo because abantu abathile bazosebenzisa umbane abantu abathile bangawusebenzisa umbane because awuzuba kucinzelelo xa umbane uthengwa ngabantu abanemali abanganamali bebamba bayobasa phandle so ngoku yilo shedding efundileyo le ibuyiswa nguEskom ngalo 36% so sithi asifuni lo shedding efundileyo tu phansi ngayo malona.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I just ask one thing? Is it Eskom alone that is supplying the Nelson Mandela Bay? I'm just trying to check here. I understand that use Jeffrey's kwecala kune human store. Just to check apha kwingxaki zikatata zalapha. Apha eNelson Mandela Bay ungasondela bawo. Sondela bawo apha eMbokweni. Umasipala
walapha.
Kwezi area zethu.
No Eskom.
Maxubeni.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, get that. I guess siyavuya. Pha kuni tata pha JB.
iJeffreys Bay supply ngumasipala.
Okay.
Ngokombane.
All right.
Inkosi.
Nkosi kakhulu. Siyabulela tata ngexesha lenu enithena lithatha ndiyathemba uba uEskom uvile because zikhona ezinye izinto that really affect even children in terms of their not getting access to electricity and they are unable to study and it is real and the frequency of load reduction is also intensifying as well and they never really got the they never tasted the no load shedding that we are talking about in other provinces and in other towns and that's what is coming out really of these presentations. We thank you so much for your time, but I think that one other thing though is also from us from NERSA in terms of the notifications to communities for our public hearings, but also Eskom, if you can also make an effort in the simplification of information that gets presented because these are people that are also affected and I think in some of the various pieces of legislation it is also stated very clearly including the Consumer Protection Act and in terms of that act even Eskom as a supplier of electricity becomes the supplier in terms of that legislation and therefore is bound by ensuring that information that is presented in a simple language and that's what that act requires. So if we can also take note of that to the extent that it is a consumer protection issue that we're also talking about today. Thank you very much. I think those are the key messages here that are coming out. All right, we then move on to BOMSA.
No, the chairperson is biased because he didn't say that these are men that represented us for a change.
Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Thank you for that, for noting that, because I could see that from this side you were not saying anything, so I decided to look this way. But thank you very much. I think for a change, men were there, and they also indicated some important things there. Is it Bosa?
Bosa.
Oh, Bosa. Hey, I'm not getting used to that. Okay. But we've got the name of Umakoba, Buwa. All right. Budi, do you have any objections in taking the oath?
Undeniable.
All right. Ngicela uphakamisisandla sakho sasekunene. uyavuma okokubana ubungqino zabo unikeza phambi kwale panel namhlanje izabe iyinyaniso nenyaniso ephelele?
Ndiyavuma.
All right, and ndicela ke tata usinikeze igama lakho nalapho usuka khona.
Lo ume phambi kwenu ngumaxhoba ayakhawuleza izinto eziphangiweyo zingxamile. Ngubhuwa ifani usuka kumbutho oyi-Build One South Africa xa ke uyishunqulela yibhosa apha e-Eastern Cape, yena ke ungusihlalo wayo.
Thank you very much. Ndicela ke tata uqalise.
Enkosi kakhulu, ndiyafuna ukubulela qala ngelithuba sithe salinikwa indoba nathi sizokudandalazisa phambi konesa indlela esiziva ngayo xa uEskom efuna ukwenyusa amaxabiso ombane. Mna ke njengomuntu omele iBuild One South Africa kule ngingqi yase-Eastern Cape, ndiyafuna kuqala ukuthi nazi izinto endifuna ke siziqwalasele. Okokuqala, the economic impact on household yayo yonke lento icelwa nguEskom. Xa uqwalasela ngokwe research esithe thina sayenza, uye ufumanise intoba u600 kilowatts per month yena uza kunyuka kule tariff increase aye ku168.24 cent xa ujonga amaxabiso. Kwakhona umuntu osebenzisa u900 kilowatts yena lo muntu ngenyanga iza kunyuka ngo398 to u405. Umuntu osebenzisa 1200 kilowatt yena ngenyanga lowo iza kunyuka imali nge531 to 541. Ekugqibeleni osebenzisa 1500 kilowatts ngenyanga wakhe uza kunyuka phaya ngo664 to 676. Izinto ke apha ezingajongwanga zezokuba iSouth Africa qala imajority, which is about more than 15 million yabantu, more than 15 million yabantu abaphangeli, and kwaye aba bantu basebenzisa umbane. Abanye apho bafumana le malana iyinkamnkam. Xa ngoku umbane unyuka ngale mali, loo nto ithi le mali yenkamnkam baza kuyisebenzisa yonke bethenga umbane, azijongwanga ezinye indleko. Umzekelo funeka bebhatele amanzi, umzekelo funeka bebhatele i-municipal cost, funeka bethengela abantwana impahla, funeka bezenze zonke ezi zinto, funeka bekhwele i-transport yothenga ukutya okunyukayo naboko mihla le. So ezo zinto zonke aziqwalaselwanga nguEskom ngexesha ecela ukwenyusa ezindleko lamaxabiso. Kwakhona masijonge intoba iza ku-impacta njani koosomashishini abasakhulayo, the SMEs. Oosomashishini bezama ukwenza amakhitshi, bathengisa ii-chips, basebenzisa umbane. Ngoku xa kunyuswa le into bayisebenzisayo, ithi loo nto imali ezaba ingeniso kuzawufuneka nabenyuse amaxabiso abo, imali ezaba ingeniso ngoku izawuncipha. Loo nto yenza lamashishini abo angasebenzi. Abanye baphela ngoku benikezela umntu kuba akakwazi usebenzisa lo mbane kuthiwa uyenyuswa namhlanje. Kwakhona make sijonge kwi-food security. Siyazi intoba izinto eMzantsi Afrika ngoku ziya-improve, njengoba zi-improve nje siya kwinto ekuthiwa yi-4th industrial revolution. Kwi-4th industrial revolution kusetyenziswa kakhulu ke i-technology. Loo nto ithi ke ngoku kufuneka ii-tractors zombane. Ezi tractors zombane kwakhona njengoba kusetyenziswa ii-tractors zombane nazo zitsala pha. Loo nto ithi ukutya ngoku ekugeneratwa okanye okulinywayo kuzawufuna umbane omo. Loo nto ithi amaxabiso okutya kwakhona ayaphinda ayenyuka, izawuafektha laa mntu ungafumani intweni nalo wawufumana inkamnkam. Sithi ke ngoku ngoko Eskom khayiqwalasele le nto. Kwakhona abanye abantu abasazamayo abasakhasayo bezama besebenzisa okanye bezama ukwenza ezolimo nabo bazawuchaphazeleka ngendlela embi ukuze bangakwazi ukuvelisa imveliso efanelekileyo ezawuthi ngomso iwenze amashishini abo ahlume. Loo nto iyakwenza ukutya ke ngoku kunciphe eMzantsi Afrika, kuphele kutyiswa abantu izinto ebekufuneka into yoba abazityiswa njengoba sibona ngoku le nto yenzeka eMzantsi Afrika. Kwakhona make siqwalasele into yoba aba ke ngoku baphangelayo, hayi siyabavuyela bayaphangela, but into emandiyithethe eMzantsi Afrika especially kwii-communities zabantu abamnyama ufumanisa into yoba onecham lokuthi afumane umsebenzi uye ngoku ajongane nabantwana bakadade wabo, ajongane nabantwana bakowabo, ajongane nabantwana bakhe. Loo nto yenza ke ngoku kule malana ayifumanayo yento yoba akwazi ukwenza izinto for ikhaya, aphele ngoku ethengela abantwana, kwakhona ethenga igrosari, ethengela wonke umuntu apha endlini. Funeka kwakhona bhatala ii-services, funeka akhe indawo yoba bahlale, kodwa umbane kufumaniseka into yoba nawo uyenyuka kweli cala. Ngoko sithi mayiqwalaselwe le nto, ngoba xa emnye umntu ephangela endlini loo nto im-affecta severely, iba ngumthwalo onzima kuye, angakwazi udevelopha sele ephangela. Yiloo nto ufumanisa uba abanye uthi ngoku ephangela aphele ngoku eyomoma ibhotile yotywala ngoba akafuni ucinga ngendlela le mali ephela ngayo, angayiboni nale nto yenzekayo, aphele ba-frustrated. Uyibekile ke utata obesuka apha indlela ababa-frustrated ngayo. Kwakhona make sijonge ke ngoku le ndaba yoba sithi sifuna i-equal education eMzantsi Afrika, kodwa enyanisweni yeyoba izikolo ezisezilokishini, izikolo ezisezilalini, xa unyusa lo mbane baphela ngoku bengakwazi bona udevelopa technologically ukuze abantwana nabo ba-advance bakwazi ufunda ngokwale mihla yanamhlanje. Loo nto inika kwakhona an unfair advantage to izikolo that are already developed ezisetown, ezizawuafodwa only ngabantu abasemagunyeni eMzantsi Afrika. Sithi ngoko thina xa kunyuswa umbane makucingelwe nezikolo eziselokishini. Kwakhona uyithethile utata apha into yoba abantwana abasezilokishini xa umbane ungekho baya-affecteka very badly, ngoba bathi umntana ezama ukwenza i-research ivele ucimo umbane endlini. Kwakhona umntana athi esafunda uvele ucima umbane endlini. Loo nto yenze angakwazi ukufunda kakuhle, loo nto ngomso im-affecte kwi-results azawuthi abe nazo. Loo nto ithi ke kule digital world sizibona sikuyo singuMzantsi Afrika, iSouth Africa iza kuhlala isemva ngenxa yento yoba amaxabiso ombane ayenyuka. Xa ndisondela kwakhona kwindaba ye-invest, okay, mandithi le nto iza kuba yiyo ke ngoku ne-threat kwi-job security, ngoba ezi SMEs xa unojonga zinintsi kakhulu kwaye ziqesha abantu. Xa ngoku ziye zivalwa, loo nto ithi i-job security eMzantsi Afrika iyancipha nayo, ngoba abantu baye bephelelwa imisebenzi. Athi nosebe nee-ideas of entrepreneurship ukuze akhulise i-society yakhe, uthi ngoku xa ebona amaxabiso ombane avele oyike ukuba loo nto uzibona engenawukwazi uyi-afoda, akwazi kwakhona uafoda kwanele business venture afuna ukungena kuyo. Kungoko thina singubhosa sisithi uEskom makeke acinge indlela ezingezinye zokugenerator imali more than increasing i-demand, more than increasing i-tariffs ebantwini. Kwakhona sikhe semka saya kweliya laseJamani, ndiyafuna ke uya ku-Eskom directly kule indawo apho sifike senza i-research ngokujonga into babona benza njani. Enyanisweni nabo bona bane-hybrid system phaya ezilalini, which is i-cities or i-provinces ezifana noMunich phaya zi-rural eza areas. Each and every household phaya ine-solar system ethi isebenzise, and emveni koko kuba ababantu bengaphangeli ngolu hlobo lwasezidolophini, ufumanisa into yoba bathi xa besebenzisa lo mbane we-solar system kwizindlu zabo, xa ushekile babuye bahambe bowuthengisela iidolophu zona eziye zifune zine-demand ya-more electricity. Sithi ke ngoko uEskom makayijonge le nto uba nathi apha eMzantsi Afrika sine-rural and urban system. Ngoko mabakhe bayijonge into yoba khe banike abantu i-chance yoba benze imali, babancede benze imali ngokuthi bathengise igrid xa ishekile bengayisebenzisanga, ukwenzela into yoba iindawo ezifana ne-urban areas ezidimanda more electricity zona ke ngoku zifumane nazo kulaa grid. Singaniki only oongxowa abathile abakwi-IPPs currently. Kwakhona siyafuna ukuthi uEskom aka-accounti ngendlela, ngoba enyanisweni uthi naxa umamela ufumanisa into yoba siyafihlelwa indlela abazisebenzisa ngayo imali, kodwa sivile into yoba inintsi i-corruption ekhe yenzeka kwaEskom. Loo nto ngoku bafuna ukubhatalisa abantu boMzantsi Afrika abangaphangeliyo. Kwakhona sivile into yoba banintsi banazo i-resources zamalahle, kodwa zona bayazithatha bazise ngaphandle bokuzithengisa. Siyafuna uaphila, khanithatheni the quality of coals kheniyisebenzise apha whilst also opening up le ndaba ye-independent power producers, so that i-South Africa ibe nale hybrid system ezawuthi i-reduce i-emission. Mandiyithethe ke le nto into yoba mhlawumbi njengoba sizawubhatala imali ezininzi ngenxa yokuba ukuqhuma kukunintsi eMzantsi Afrika kuba sisebenzisa amalahle kakhulu, khaniyiconsideration into yoba i-generators xa uthenga i-diesel uyokwetha kwi-generator nayo iyacontributa kule carbon emission. Therefore khanijongeni ezinye indlela zokuba i-load shedding ingaphinde ibuye. Xa sigqibezela siyafuna ukuthi noko xa beninyukile kwiminyaka edlulileyo khanikhe nicinge indlela yokudileya, mhlawumbi nani ibe after elections indaba yoba nicinge ngokwenyusa umbane, ngoba xa nizawunyusa every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, noko niyababetha abantu, and okwesibini aninandlela nibancedisa ngayo. Ekugqibeleni siyafuna ukuthi makufike ingxelo esuka kuEskom uba imali zabo bazisebenzisa njani. Mayisiwe eParlamente ingafihlwa, ngoba kumaxesha adlulileyo eka-Transnet neka-Eskom neka-SAA sivile into yoba azizokwazi ukuvezwa kuthi njengabantu balapha eMzantsi Afrika. Loo nto yasenza buhlungu. Nina ke ningu-Eskom zivezeni ukwenzela into yoba sizokwazi xa nisiza nisithi nibethalakala kule ndawo sikwazi nathi ukuthi hayi noko kudala ngoku makhe sizameni nathi sibanike le nto bayifunayo. Siyacela kwakhona into yoba makufikwe kwiindawo zonke kwii-community zethu before mhlawumbi niye kunesa niyocela into yoba kunyuswe amaxabiso, khaniye kuqala kwi-communities nijonge into yoba ningancokola njani nabahlali ukwenzela into yoba nabo mhlawumbi bangaveza ii-ideas ezinothi zimncede u-Eskom akwazi ukuphucuka naye kwindlela asebenza ngayo. Kungoko ke sisiza sisithi noko le ngoku i-tariff increase niyicelayo thina singubhosa sithi i-South Africa abantu bomzantsi Afrika abakabi ready until nina you are ready to change your way of operation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Buti. I think ndiyacinga into yoba imiyalezo wakho nexesha nalo beseliphelile ndiyacinga into yoba ngabana imiyalezo yakho ibicace kakhulu kanganto banabo ke banazo nezi headphones. And I think ondingakutsho kwendikugxininise just something to emphasize out of what he's saying. I think Eskom also maybe from your customer relations point of view, they are asking that sometimes take a different approach of trying to reach out to communities, because it will also help Eskom to hear what their issues are and find ways of even improving communities to actually pay and not, steal electricity and do all sorts of things. So you might be surprised in getting a positive response from communities, and also making sure that communities will actually work with Eskom to assist Eskom's sustainability in providing electricity. I think that's a positive thing also that is coming out, as opposed to think that communities are, violent and they might not listen to you. Maybe that is something to take away with. Siyabulela Tata. Of course. We are now going to call Nelson Mandela Bay Business Chamber. We've got the name of Mr. David Mertens. Good day. Mr. Mertens, can you please? Okay. Do you have any objections in taking the oath?
Of course not.
All right. May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
All right. Thank you very much. Please state your names and the portfolio at the chamber.
Okay. My name is David Mertens, so I represent the Nelson Mandela Bay Business Chamber here today. And I'm also a director at Autocast, which you might know. We have two